Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of It's a Wonderful Podcast. It's episode 68. I am particularly excited for this episode because not only do we have another brand new guest to the show, we're also doing a movie that this particular guest has some personal sort of connection to, and one that means a lot to him. Whether it's bad or good, I'm sure it will be an interesting discussion nonetheless. But first off, I must introduce him. We had his wife, Ashley Davis, on a few weeks ago when we were talking about Night of the Living Dead. Joe Davis, hello, hi.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Of course, I'm very excited that you agreed to come on. Why don't you go straight ahead and tell everyone which movie you chose to talk about today?
I have chosen the, I believe, 1968 musical classic, My Fair Lady, the retelling of the movie, or the story Pygmalion, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of rusty on the history, but there's little tidbits that I know here and there.
Yeah, George Bernard Shaw, or Bernard Shaw, however you pronounce that. His original play, I believe, from 1912 was the original play around then.
Sounds right.
Yeah, and My Fair Lady, I actually believe, was 4 years earlier than you said. It was
Okay,
1964.
1964. Right.
I do know that it won 8 Academy Awards.
That, yeah, doesn't surprise me.
And
It's one of those huge spectacle films.
It absolutely is. Yeah, My Fair Lady, of course, with Audrey Hepburn, with Rex Harrison as the two leads there. I would say
Eliza Doolittle and
Henry
Dr.
Higgins.
Henry Higgins.
Yes.
Henry Higgins.
who is potentially one of the most unlikable human beings. Especially in the first half of this movie, he is particularly nasty and cruel and kind
I
of
would
the
say,
worst.
even with some of the later musical numbers, he's pretty still, even in the last half of the movie, incredibly unlikable and cruel.
Yeah, I like the attempt to try a little bit of redemption with him. They just try. Oh, okay. Last 20 minutes now. Let's just put this little thing in there, make us all think that he was just, damaged and kind of in love all along. No, he's just mean.
Yeah, and it's like, what's he damaged by? His mother is incredibly, like, forward-thinking and sweet and wants to, So, like, where's this damage coming from?
His mother is the best, but we will get on to all that right off the bat. Now, you told me that you have some nice stories about yourself and My Fair Lady.
Yep.
Please go ahead.
So this movie was on constantly growing up, and I have this fond memory. I'm sure my mom still has it somewhere at their house of the double VHS pack back in the day when, like, these super long movies that when apparently they were in the theater had intermissions, which when, like, Endgame was coming out and they said it was going to be 3 hours long and they were toying with the idea of having an intermission in there, I was super excited for that idea. I just want that intermission screen with the music playing and all that junk. But I just every other day practically. So there was a point in my life leading up to, like, junior high that I could lip sync with this entire movie and knew all the songs and everything else because this movie was on so much in my youth. This movie is such a deep memory to me that in my senior year of high school, I was in a speech class. And towards the end of the year, we had a part where we were essentially, like, kind of not really doing anything serious anymore because it's like the last 2 weeks of school or something. So we watched this movie because it's a speech class, and that's relatively relevant to the subject at hand. So we watch the movie. But a big thing here is teachers will often, when they want to do a movie day or movie days, they'll still make like a packet of questionnaires so the students have to pay attention so they're not just goofing off the whole time.
Yeah.
So this movie is roughly, what, 2.5 hours long?
It's, I mean, 2 hours 50.
Okay, so it's almost 3, yeah.
It's a long thing.
So the average class period was about 50 minutes or so, 45 to 50 minutes when I was a senior. And the packet was, or the movie was designed to last like 4 days almost. So I turned in the packet at the end of the first day of class when we're still in the first 40, 50 minutes of the movie. And the next day, the teacher pulled me aside and she's like, Joe, you got 100 on that packet, and you turned it in way before the movie was even done. And I'm like, I know. Yeah, I knew. It's like, and it's all questions about like what happens in the movie. It's not like the questions were even about like linguistics or elocution or anything like that. It was all about just like plot points of the movie. So I'm like, I know this.
Not even like a film class where it's some sort of analysis. Right. It's just who says this to who in act.
Where do they go? Where do they go to first test Eliza's ability to like blend in with the noble crowd or whatever? Yeah. It's like, oh, it's the box derby.
Yeah.
Come on, Dova, move your bleeding ass.
I think that is a great time. I think that is a great line to say straight away that this movie I found actually rather funny.
Yes.
Despite the fact that some of the stuff that's actually going on, when you take a little time to think about it, is highly questionable. But I was kind of laughing straight from the first song, which is Henry Higgins singing about how he hates everybody else's way of speaking.
Mm-hmm. Why can't the English teach your children how to speak?
Which is very funny to me, because obviously being British, knowing full well the level of accents that exist in this country, and some lines in that are just like singling out specific accents and telling everybody how terrible they are is just very funny to me. And it's even more funnier because Rex Harrison was born in Merseyside near Liverpool, which is a traditionally fairly unpleasant accent to a lot of people. I'm not going to say personal opinions on that, but anybody who knows me to some sort of extent would be able to figure that out. But I just find that funny, how Rex Harrison is from like a place known for its very distinct accent, and he's the one calling out everybody else's accents for being terrible. And like you said, why can't the English teach their children how to speak?
Yep. I think it's fascinating too, just pointing out, that's one of the interesting things about this movie, approaching it as an adult and actually noticing certain things that England has, for a country the size that it is, an island basically, that has such a broad collection of dialects and accents and things like that, where you can have 10 different accents from one city basically.
Oh, so absolutely you can.
Yeah. Something fascinating I found about the movie that I'd imagine is actually relatively accurate. Something I hadn't considered before, and it shows how long it's been since I actually last watched this movie, but still remember it fully. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean the idea of accents changing as you drive every 10 minutes in this country is very true. I could go out now and drive 10 minutes away and be in a place where they talk distinctly differently than I do.
And we kind of have that here too, but considering the size of our country over here in America, that makes a little more sense in how you have entire chunks of this country that are settled by various different people from different countries. Like I'm in Texas, and we have that southern accent thing here, that twang that people get when they get too far in the South.
Yes.
But we also have, that like more mild accent. Like I'd imagine mine is a more mild southern accent. But
Yeah.
you go further north, and you're gonna get a lot more German influence, and you're still in Texas, so
Oh,
just
yeah. Yeah, it is kind of fascinating, and I like that you're coming at it from, being in this linguistics class.
yeah.
I like it being shown in a class like that. Actually, did they never, did they ever get you to say your vowels for 3 days straight into
Um,
a microphone?
Not into a microphone, no, but that would have been fascinating.
Just
I
ev-
A I O U.
some
But I do remember elementary, like we had to learn our vowels, but by the time we're learning what vowels are, we've supposedly been speaking for like 6 years at that point, or 4 years at that point.
yeah. No, this movie, like we said, it's a grand movie. It's obviously it's typical of a '60s musical.
Yep.
Directed, of course. I should mention this. I should have mentioned this straight away. Directed by George Cukor, who is a wonderful director. I love George Cukor's movies. Kind of moved more into doing. Oh, I say that. Maybe it's wrong. I was going to say he kind of moved more into doing musicals towards the end of his career. But he also was an uncredited director on The Wizard of Oz. So
Yeah.
there's that as well. George Cukor just very talented. Obviously, I think his biggest other credited musical, at least, is probably the 1954 A Star Is Born with Judy Garland,
Yep.
which is...
Which
Yeah,
I would
it's a
say
very
was Wizard,
similarly grand movie.
which I was also going to say, Wizard of Oz was another movie that was constantly on at our house. My stepdad would be the one that would lip sync along to that. So
I mean, I get that as well.
yeah,
I'm perfectly... I'm one to lip sync along with something like Wizard of Oz. It's kind of
it
impossible
is,
not to when something like that's on.
and I think that goes like hand in hand with some of my love of like modern blockbusters, because those movies are usually endlessly quotable. And that
Yeah.
kind of goes back to my love of some of these classic movies that are also endlessly quotable. There's this weird gap of time between like the 70s and 90s where there were quotable stuff in there, don't get me wrong, but I don't know. It just feels like it wasn't nearly as designed to be. And then you also have like these modern art house films that are not designed to be as quotable as like your blockbusters are. And if it's quotable, I'll remember things from it way faster.
I find that very interesting because a lot of people, I think, would say like movies from the 80s and 90s are some of their most quotable
Okay, yeah.
movies possible.
I think that's less of the movie and more of the actors involved, though. Like
That's a good point.
you look at like the average Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, and I can't think of any other action star being able to deliver the lines the way he would deliver it, and it still be as memorable. But that could also be me just associating the movie with the actor way too hard. So
Well, everybody watches movies in their own way, and nobody should be judging you for only quoting movies from before 1980. You are speaking my language when it comes to that. Quite clearly, you are speaking my language when it comes to that
I
sort
mean,
of stuff.
I can also have my claws in some quotable moments from the '80s, like I mentioned some Schwarzenegger lines, but then there's also movies that other people just absolutely hate, like Masters of the Universe. But that movie wouldn't be as enjoyable to me if it wasn't for Frank Langella just eating up the scenery the whole time.
Yeah, I imagine it's obviously the same with stuff like Flash Gordon,
Yep.
which 1983 or something, which is a ridiculous movie, but it's ridiculously quotable as well because of just some of
But
the outlandishness.
yep.
There's very
But
little
it
outlandishness in My Fair Lady.
With most of the characters, I would agree, but then you have Mr. Doolittle, Eliza's father, who is pretty crazily outlandish,
Well,
and the transition that he goes through as well, where he goes
I
from this like lackadaisical bum to wearing a suit practically.
I maybe find Mr. Alfred P. Doolittle. I maybe find him the most interesting character in this movie. And I even forgot he was in the movie up until he
Yep,
shows up again with like
yep,
half an hour to go. Because like I
yep,
said, this is a 2 hours 50-minute movie, and no, you don't necessarily feel the time because it flows really nicely as a musical like this does. Like Joe said, it has the intermission, it has the little piece of music that plays right as you come back in for the second part. It's not exactly split into halves, it's more like 2/3 and then the final third.
yep.
But I always love an intermission. It makes you feel like you're watching a movie, and that's why I love watching movies. I love watching my movies are my favorite things when I can tell I'm watching a movie
Yep.
and not watching a documentary. If I want to watch a documentary, I'll go and watch a documentary.
Yep.
If I want to watch a movie, I want to know I'm watching a movie, and it's why I enjoy very grand musicals like this. It's why I often say on this show, Oliver from 1968 is one of my absolute favourite movies for very similar reasons. In that I always watched it as a child, I could quote it endlessly,
Yep.
and it has this appeal to it. It has this real entertainment
And
value.
I think that's also part of the magic of like musicals from that era too. Is it's that spectacle of feeling like you've gone to both the theater and a stage presentation without actually having to go to both. It's like that weird bridging the gap between the two mediums of entertainment, and then even when you get to the home theater experience, so to speak, even though that wasn't really a thing back in the day whenever I was, growing up in southeast corner of Houston with little to no money, but watching that on VHS, like with the intermission and everything in it, kind of made me feel like I was going to the actual movies. Like I would turn off the lights in the room and watch this on the TV.
Yeah,
And with that intermission, it felt fancy.
yeah,
Like I'm like, oh
absolutely.
yes, I need to go refill my small solo cup of soda. Yes, to the lobby.
Abs- Absolutely, it does. It makes you want to go and put on the kind of suit that Mister Doolittle is wearing towards the end of the movie, with
God,
the
that
with the little
suit.
top hat. That might actually just little bit of a tangent on that whole situation. That might actually be my favourite song in the whole movie.
Get me to the church.
Get Me to the Church on Time. I
Yep.
think I read as well that I forget his name. I think it's Stanley Holloway who plays Alfred Doolittle. He was actually the only one to actually sing his own songs.
Yep.
Because when it comes to Rex Harrison and the guy who plays Pickering, and we'll get on to Pickering because Pickering is also like a great, ridiculous
Yes.
piece of nonsense. They talk their way through their songs,
Yep.
and Audrey Hepburn, very sadly, is dubbed over
Yes.
by someone else. Something that I believe Audrey Hepburn was not happy about at the time.
No, she was not. And I remember my mom was the one telling me that when I was young, that she's the only one that's quote unquote not singing her songs the whole movie.
Yeah,
That yeah, you pointed out Rex Harrison and I just pulled him up. Wilfred Hyde White.
yeah.
Wilfred Hyde White. Both kind of talked their way through their songs, and yeah, there were some points where you could say that they might be singing, but it's barely.
It's they clearly can't sing that well, which is also kind of fascinating because I know obviously, and you mentioned this before as well. Watching a movie like this feels like you're going to a theatre. It helps when Rex Harrison also played Henry Higgins in the theatre production.
Yep.
I always love that about seems to frequently happen in musicals of that era of like the 50s and the 60s, where the cast would come over from the Broadway production or the West End production or whatever it was. Seems to happen less these days. I always like it when it does happen these days, or when some sort of news comes out that it's going to happen, where any musical, any Broadway musical that's made into a film has the actors from the actual stage production. I always like that.
Even if it's not a musical, that happens some nowadays, where there'll be movies of like classic Shakespearean plays where they'll have someone that's portrayed a character on stage playing the character in the film as well. I think there was something with Tom Hiddleston playing one of the King of England plays or something like that. I can't remember.
I don't know. What was it? One of the Shakespeare ones? I mean, there's quite a lot of them.
There are. I think that's why I can't remember any of them.
Yeah. Who would Tom Hiddleston play? Richard III? Henry V?
I think Richard sounds familiar.
Richard, maybe. Tom Hiddleston, is he villainous enough to play Richard III? Yes, of course he is. It was probably Richard III.
That makes sense.
Okay. But yeah, you can also really tell when these actors have played these parts before. And what another notable sort of piece of trivia, if you will, about the movie is that Audrey Hepburn, of course, didn't play Eliza Doolittle on stage. That was Julie Andrews,
which
Mary Poppins herself.
Would have been interesting.
It would have been.
Like with Audrey Hepburn, I kind of buy both angles of Eliza Doolittle, both the street gutter flower girl type persona, and the high society one. But Julie Andrews, I can't see slumming it up as a flower girl, living off of coins a day. I
feel the complete opposite.
You think?
Maybe it's just me having with the Audrey Hepburn films that I watch over and over again. I'm looking at Roman Holiday. Now, Roman Holiday, she's a princess.
Yeah.
I always see Audrey Hepburn as this real high society person. So I haven't seen
nearly as many Audrey Hepburn fan or movies. I'm more of a Catherine fan. So.
Catherine Hepburn is my absolute favorite actress of all time.
Desk Set was also one of the movies I grew up loving. Absolutely.
There's no one that comes near Catherine Hepburn. You can throw Meryl Streep at me all you goddamn want to. It's Catherine Hepburn.
Nothing beats a Catherine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy movie for me.
No. Unless it's a Catherine Hepburn and Cary Grant movie.
Also Humphrey Bogart, because I talk about like this movie was a movie I grew up with and watched to death. My mom went through like 3 VHSs of African Queen.
I mean, yeah. It's a good one. Speaking of Cary Grant, actually, as well, I heard that Cary Grant was supposedly up for the role of Professor Higgins, but met with Jack Warner, the producer of, course, namesake Warner Brothers,
right?
And insisted that if Rex Harrison didn't play the role, that Cary Grant wouldn't even see the movie.
Oh, wow.
Apparently that's a quote, is that Cary Grant insisted Rex Harrison play the role or he wouldn't go and see this particular movie.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Something else interesting I love about this movie is it does feel like it's the basic premise is kind of timeless insofar because we were talking about it, Ashley and I were talking about while we were watching the movie, that it is kind of redone over and over in like 80s teen comedies and stuff.
Yeah.
Where it's about the pretty girl who you only find out she's pretty because they take the glasses off or something like that.
Yeah, it's very kind of similar to that. Oh, of course, this is done on way more of a huge scale.
Oh, definitely.
It's obviously a kind of a film about class, obviously, and a film about
The
a
battle of
film
the
about
sexes and
battle of the sexes, but a very misogynistic battle of the sexes type
oh
of
yes,
situation. There's a lot of misogyny in the movie, nearly all of it coming out of the mouth of Rex Harrison.
and in Pickering, which we haven't gotten to yet, and we've broached him a few times, is the better of the two, but it's that whole problem I found out going into high school that chivalry isn't all it's cracked up to be kind of situation where Colonel Pickering's a nice guy, except he's also the one that really thinks that Eliza should just be in the kitchen all the time or something along those lines.
And he's
Don't
also
screw
the
with
one,
the status quo.
and he's also the one that sets the bet off, the wager to Henry to turn this gutter snipe, as he often calls her,
to make her pass
into
as a duchess.
to make her pass as a duchess. And yet Pickering, I couldn't help but laugh at Pickering. Maybe it's just me and my weird humour, but he doesn't actually do anything.
No,
He's just always there, reading a book, or looking at the paper, or doing something.
Or saying something along the lines of, I say there, or now listen here, or something along those lines. He's just there to, kind of provide a counterweight to Henry Higgins.
Yeah, to soften
guess.
Henry Higgins. He's there to soften him. If you just had Henry Higgins, look, Henry Higgins is unlikable as hell anyway.
But is that kind of unlikable that you love watching?
Oh yeah, and Rex Harrison won the Best Actor Oscar for this.
Yeah.
Another interesting fact: Audrey Hepburn wasn't even nominated.
Wow.
And guess who won that year for Mary Poppins? Julie Andrews. It all links. It all links in a horrible circle of who starred in what movie.
Right.
I also believe the quote in Rex Harrison's acceptance speech was, I think, that Audrey Hepburn actually presented that particular award to Rex Harrison, and I believe he said that this is for my two fair ladies. He sort of, commemorated both Audrey and Julie Andrews in that way. So that was nice of him. I mean, by all accounts, Rex Harrison, the human being, is not Professor Henry Higgins.
He is not the trash fire of misogyny that is Henry Higgins.
He just happens to play it very well.
He does. Well, it's a bombastic character, and it's like, we mentioned Tom Hiddleston earlier. Tom Hiddleston is not Loki, but gosh, if he's not a lovable Loki.
Yeah. It's very true. It's very true. But yeah, I just kept laughing at Pickering, not because he was doing anything funny, but just because he was there doing absolutely nothing. And he was just always there. What does he do with his time?
Easily flabbergasted, and and then him along with the rest of and I think it just goes into the hilarity of this movie, the rest of the house staff of Henry's house. They're not even focusing on how much Eliza is probably exhausted by all this. They're all like, dude, Professor Higgins, you gotta calm down. You're exhausting yourself. And she's the one, like, trying to keep a flame lit with her voice, or talking with a mouthful of marbles that she's swallowing half the time. And things like that.
That is dangerous. That is dangerous. I wouldn't want to do that. Don't be swallowing marbles, kids. Don't be doing any of that, or setting almost yourself on fire because you keep having to say the letter H.
Right.
Very pronounced. And I would try it now, but I don't want to ruin people's ears. Obviously, I don't want to start doing some sort of elocution lesson, even though I probably need one.
I'm pretty sure I do too.
Accents, Joe. Accents are fun, aren't they? But yeah, the house staff, which was maybe the weirdest song, which was poor poor Professor Higgins.
Professor Higgins, like night and day he slaves away. Oh, poor Professor Higgins.
No concern for the well-being of Eliza whatsoever.
It is probably in my like top 5 favorite montages in movie history, where it's just this montage of all the crap she's going through, and the song ends. The first one of the chunks of that song ends on talking about like doesn't eat, doesn't drink, doesn't touch a crumb, and it's him eating crumb cake at the end of that song, and it's just it's like this perfect period at the end of the sentence of being like, really though. Like, 'cause you talked about how funny this movie is, and yeah, it is. It is, I like, unironically hilarious.
It really is. Another particularly funny line. It's more towards the end of the movie. It's when Pickering keeps saying, "Oh, I'm dashed. Well, I'm dashed," and then Henry just says, "Would you stop being dashed and do something about it?" And I laughed kind of hard at
We also joked that what was his name, Freddie, the
Freddie
Oxford,
yeah,
who's just kind of there to be like pretty, which is really funny when you think about it. He's
kind of pretty.
Yeah, he's very
He's
pretty.
kind of a pretty man though.
He makes me think of like a 1960s Billy Zane. Like he's just kind of got those like features that make you think of Billy Zane. But it's really funny that we joked that he's kind of like a precursor to Sting, because 3/4 of his screen time is him singing about how he's just like chilling on the street where she lives, and there's nothing wrong with that. This kid that probably has never known hardship in his life is basically living homeless now because he just wants to wait and see her come out of this house.
I mean, I didn't exactly care about Freddie or what he was doing. It's kind of it's an unnecessary part of the movie, to be honest.
Yeah. I think he's literally there for her to reference about like, well, I could marry Freddie, to try and make him jealous, and that's it. That's his whole existence in this movie.
Sorry, Freddie, you got a bad role there, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Of course, Freddie comes from, and we should talk about this, Freddie comes from the first instance of Eliza in high society public, where the professor and Colonel Pickering, take her to Ascot races, the horse racing. Yay.
Which is probably one of the weirdest and most like separate from the rest of the movie sets, because everything else feels like they're trying to be like England, like actually England. This feels like it came out of like Logan's Run or something.
It does. It's weirdly way too white. It's strange. It's very, very. I get exactly what you mean.
Everything's like stark contrasts, and everything's just weird and all over the place. People's hats are, and I understand that, like, yeah, you go to these big fancy events and people are going to have weird clothes and stuff, but it is the most jarring and different aspect from the rest of this film. Like, nothing in the rest of this film is like this. Even the ball, the Duchess's ball or something, the Queen's ball that she goes to later, is feels more like an actual thing than this. This just feels like, I don't know. I can't even describe it. It's so weird.
It's got a very weird opening song as well. That whole sequence where everybody's just staring slightly off camera.
They look like they're voguing from the 80s, that like 80s model look where they're kind of like dead faced. But the whole song is about how excited they are and how this is like just like the best day ever, and it's delivered in like this flat tone the whole time, and it's something I never really realized how hilarious it was when I was young, but coming back and watching this as an adult, I'm like, that's just the best thing ever.
That is precisely what they're doing. Maybe it's just George Cukor wanting to make it kind of silly.
Yeah.
And just having it like that, and I appreciate that. I appreciate George Cukor trying to make stuff silly all the time. But yes, that is, of course, we've had the whole Rain in Spain situation song, which is maybe the most famous thing
I like to call
about
it.
this movie.
I like to call it this movie's "Singing in the Rain" moment, where like
Yeah,
they're singing about being up all night and they're not, But it's the same
yeah.
thing. It's two male actors and a female actor, and they're singing a very memorable song. I say singing, but
One of them,
two
well, actually, none of them are singing.
exactly.
Two of them are
Then
talking,
it
and one of
moves,
them is in a recording booth somewhere.
and then it moves straight from that song into another song of "I Could Have Danced All Night," which is exactly what "Singing in the Rain"
Yeah.
does. It moves from the song where they're talking about like we're up all night doing things to one of the characters singing separately from the rest of them in another very memorable moment of the movie.
Very true. Very true. Nice comparisons with Singing in the Rain there. I like that. But yeah, I'm sure everybody who knows movies to a certain extent is aware enough of the rain in Spain.
Stays mainly
Stays
in the
mainly
plane.
in the plane from My Fair Lady. If not, maybe you are familiar with Rex Harrison's exclamation of, "By George, she's got it! I
Yep.
think she's got it!" To
It's
which
it's
is
really
the
funny too
most
because
it's the most English thing ever.
it feels very much also like it's like a Frankenstein moment. Like it's his she or he's alive. He's alive.
And the sad thing is, I fully believe that Professor Higgins thinks she is his Frankenstein.
Probably. I would love to see a Frankenstein with Rex Harrison as Dr. Frankenstein now because I think that would also be delightfully like kind of hammy and fun.
Oh, I was watching this and I had in my head this perfect role that I thought Rex Harrison should have played, and I can't now for the life of me remember what it was. But I
Well,
remember I remember.
he already was Dr. Doolittle.
Well, I mean that's just funny
Yeah.
at this point. Everything comes around in a circle. Why is everything linked in this movie?
Because
Everything
time
has so
flows
many
like a river.
links. Time does flow like a river. Time is
Just gonna
also
go.
cyclical.
Last
And
circle.
what comes around goes around, and other time related proverbs. No, that's enough of time related proverbs. We will now actually talk about what happens at the Royal Ascot racecourse, which it
Yep.
all seems to be going quite nice.
Until the
Jeez.
race.
Until the race.
Well, and then she has kind of a moment too before where, when he's talking to his mom, he tells her that Eliza is told to stick to like two topics. It's like the weather and like asking about people's health, and that's it.
Yeah.
But that spirals into Eliza going into this anecdotal story about people that had done her aunt in because she is sure that someone pinched the straw hat that was due to her. So that's the people that had done her aunt in. And everyone's just like, they what now?
Oh,
'Cause there's-
it's just, what do they call it? It's just the new,
the new like short speak or something like that.
yeah. And then everybody seems really impressed with that. Oh, you're very good at the new way of speaking there, Eliza.
Yeah.
Yes, oh, yes. And then, yeah, and then the race happens. And it is kind of funny to watch Professor Higgins in those moments where he's realising, oh, God, I've taught her how to pronounce things, but I've not actually taught her how to speak properly yet.
Right.
And then in the race, she gets a bit too excited about the horse winning,
Yeah.
which is funny.
Was it the horse that Freddie gave her the ticket for? Dover, I believe, was his name.
Yeah. And then a very loud and unfortunate exclamation comes out, which causes people to start fainting unnecessarily because, it's the horse races and it's high society and people faint at the word arse, which is funny.
Someone exclaiming it loudly. Someone showing any slightest hint of emotion, apparently.
Oh, they don't like emotion in this movie.
No, they do not. It's too much.
No. Nobody likes.
They'll become flabbergasted and faint.
And dashed.
Oh, no.
I'm dashed. Oh, I'm dashed.
Stop dashing.
I'm just gonna go and drink my port and smoke a cigar and.
This is the second time in the past year that I've been like, oh, I need to try port. Never tried port before.
I've never tried port either. It seems like such a fancy drink.
Yeah,
It's
I just
too
thought
fancy for everyone.
See, I just thought it was one of those like 30 different wines that exist, just like a variation of red wine or something. But apparently, it is its own thing, and I don't know. Sounds fun.
It is, yeah. It's its own thing. It just always seems to be the go-to drink of any sort of high society. You
equate it with the characters that have taste.
Yeah, or in any movie from this particular era or earlier, when they're all getting together in suits, having some sort of fancy party. Mm-hmm. Everybody is drinking port, or has a cigar or a pipe,
Maybe all three.
The women have cigarettes in cigarette holders that are about
the little Cruella de Vil holders.
Yeah, all the ones that are like 2 foot long and they have to hold separately.
Yep.
And then just put or people have glasses on a stick.
Yep.
Like opera glasses, but they're not using it at the opera.
They can't actually hold them. They have to. It's too much to hold them, like, directly with their hand. They have to have the stick attached to them.
They have to have. They can't move their hand towards their face. Their hand is not allowed within 6 inches of their own face, so they have to.
It's too undignified.
It's way too undignified. That's why they all wear gloves, because if they have to touch their face, at least they're wearing gloves so they don't contaminate their own face.
But it's really funny that the chunk of time between the horse race and the ball,
yeah,
where he's trying to pass her off as a duchess, is another one of those like nebulous scenes where they're like, I think it's the intermission that separates the two, and that's it, or something along those lines.
Yeah, I think it's coming back from the horse race when she's kind of upset, and everybody's kind of upset because Professor Higgins is realizing, there's a little more work to do here.
Mm-hmm.
But then like you said, it is kind of just the intermission mainly.
Then they do the ball, and then it's hilarious at the ball. There's that one character that's literally just there for that scene. That was like a pupil of Higgins, and you can tell because not only is he a linguist, but he's also kind of a dick. That he makes it his goal to like figure out who Eliza is. So like there's like a 5-minute period in this scene where Higgins is like running like interference until he's just like, you know what? Let him try. I don't care. So
he's kind of funny, and honestly, I would be one to put him in the Mustache Hall of Fame.
Yes,
that we have here. If he wasn't such an unlikable human being, now usually that wouldn't come into play, but this guy just really annoyed me.
Yes,
so I don't want to give him the honor.
You're not so, because I think this guy, however he decided to play this character, he played it really well insofar that he literally just like made you dislike him almost immediately. More than Higgins. You disliked him more than Higgins.
Yeah, absolutely. Because he's such an expert on he's got such an expert ear to hear people's language. He can place an accent within, streets or something like that. And he is convinced that Eliza is not who Higgins
who she says she
is. And he wants to get to the bottom of it because he probably wants to cause some sort of scene and make himself out to be this genius language person.
be able to show up his former quote unquote mentor.
And also the is it the Queen of Transylvania
Yep.
or the Duchess of Transylvania or something like that, who is there,
Yep.
who this guy is enamored with for some reason.
Well, I think he's supposed to be like her interpreter or something like that.
Okay.
Or something. I can't remember off the top of my head. Because again, he's only here for this one scene. And
Yeah.
it's not very much other than that. I'm trying to actually find the character's name so we can
I forget
stop calling him that guy. But
he's the guy with the mustache. He's the annoying guy. He's got a mustache.
and the guy, yeah, there's like a 2-minute period in the scene where Higgins comments on his hair, and that's it. Like it's all talking about his haircut. Like, well, why are you growing your hair out? Why don't you get your hair cut? He's like, well, if I get my hair cut, people won't remember who I am. I'm like, I can't even remember who you are, and you didn't get your hair cut.
Do we not think that is exactly typical of a movie musical of this particular era? Is that they take 2 hours 50 minutes to tell a very short story?
Yeah, basically. You take out the musical moments and the pointless parts of the story that don't matter at all for the story, and you probably would only have about like an hour 20.
Yeah, and that's what can put people off musicals, but that's also what can draw people like me, like you, like Rachel Silvestrini, who's been on this show multiple times. What draws her to a musical is the elaborateness, the grandeur of it, the fact that it takes its time, the fact that it can have these 10-minute musical numbers, sometimes maybe 5-minute musical numbers, and go very not go far at all in the story. I remember thinking, watching obviously this movie back, after 20 minutes I was like, okay, we've had like 2 songs. I bet we're like 25 minutes in right now, but absolutely nothing's happened yet. But that's so typical. And I don't mind that at all.
I think there's 2 musical numbers before Eliza even tries to go to Higgins's place to take him up on his offer. There might have even been 3 before she starts her actual lessons proper. Because I think there might have been 4. Because there's the first 2. There's the why can't the English teach her children how to speak? Then there's the one about her, like, all I want is a room somewhere.
Wouldn't it be lovely?
Wouldn't it be lovely? And I think there's the Woman in Your Life song. Let a Woman in Your Life.
Oh, yeah. That was peak misogyny from Professor Higgins.
The only thing I love about that entire number is when he the lines about the Hungarian mother with a voice that shatters glass, but also when he starts turning on all his recordings, like that's something that resonated with me as a kid. I'm like, that's silly, silly.
And annoys Pickering because he's singing this to Pickering. God knows how Pickering is actually dealing with it all.
Yeah, the same way he deals with everything, with that military training ability to just he's probably very dashed at that moment anyway.
Incredibly dashed. He's just sat there. He's happy. He's got a glass of port. He's happy. I also noticed, which shouldn't really need being brought up at all, whenever anybody gets a drink of port in this movie, they never put the stopper back on the glass thing.
That feels like a crime.
They put the stopper back on the glass. The port will ruin.
Yes.
You will ruin the beverage if you do not put the glass stopper back on the bottle. So, don't know why I felt the need to bring that up, but I did.
A oversight on the part of the directors as to the proper application of port.
Absolutely. But yeah, so moving on towards maybe the end of this movie, the final little act of this movie. Is there anything in that particular sequence, or a number of sequences that really stand out?
This is probably my favorite scene involving a character we've been introduced to already in the movie with Higgins' mother.
Yes.
And how, like, I can kind of see how he is such a domineering presence, but I can't understand how he's fully as, like, wildly misogynistic as he is with a mom like his, because she seems like one that wouldn't let him be like that, because she doesn't give him any quarter. Like, she may, like, give in when he asks for something, but she never lets him forget it. Like, she always is giving him crap, and she is probably, of all of the non three main characters in this movie, she is probably my absolute favorite of all the characters. Because when he shows up at her house where Eliza is, she just lays into him every time she can, and he's pouting. She puts him pouting, which he's always been a character that has been able to snap back and whip back when someone gives him any sort of problem. There's the scene earlier in the movie where Alfred Doolittle shows up, and he's just constantly snapping back at him with these sarcastic one-liners. But his mom puts him to where he goes and sits on the little couch thing she's got in her little sunroom, and he's like pouting the whole time. He's like got his back to the rest of them, and it's just hilarious.
She puts him in timeout.
Yeah, basically.
She completely puts him in timeout. Gladys Cooper, by the way, who plays Mrs. Higgins, she is an absolute true legend, and we love her. But yeah, she is great. Absolutely. I feel like Alfred Doolittle is still my favourite non-main character.
Yeah, I can see that.
Just because I actually think his character arc is kind of great. I know obviously Eliza's is pretty big, up to the fact that she obviously ends the movie kind of being accepting that, yeah, okay, I can deal with this new way of speaking. I've somewhat becoming friends with Henry, with Higgins, despite the fact that he's been horrible to her for all of the movie. I don't particularly. I would have liked to see Eliza completely shun Henry at the end of this movie, and just carry on being who she wanted to be, whether that was the lady who, or the well-spoken person, but going back to living some sort of modest life, whether that may be with Freddie or whoever. I would have kind of liked that as an ending, rather than this kind of, oh, let's be nice to Henry Higgins ending.
I think it's kind of a weird situation with this movie, because it's kind of it's the situation where growing up and realizing your favorites are problematic. It's the whole idea that it's like gaslighting, or a weird way to look at it is like a drug addiction situation, because all she wanted growing, like earlier in the movie, the whole song is like she just wants a room where she's like comfortable and has the things she needs. She wants what a lot of people in her financial situation want. They don't necessarily want to be rich, but they just want to be like not worrying about things anymore. Like they don't want to be stressed about money and whether they're going to have enough money for their room tonight or something. And she's finally got that. And even further, Higgins has told her once or twice that, like, you could go get a middle-class job at this point with your ability to speak, which is funny with the £5 that Henry Higgins gave Alfred P. Doolittle. He turned into a middle-class merchant type person. I'm like, that's a weird, but he's also got the gift of gab. I think Higgins even told or mentioned that he'd make a great politician if he could actually speak. But that's neither here nor there.
Well, didn't Higgins, because Higgins was getting these letters from an American university or an American lecturer to have him come and guest lecture about like morality and linguistics.
Yeah.
But
so he recommended him for like philosophy.
Yeah, he recommends Alfred Doolittle as being one of the most uniquely, having some of the most unique morals in England.
Yep.
So Alfred Doolittle ends up a very successful human being.
Yeah. But
which is fun, because he gets rid of absolutely none of his previous character.
No.
He retains it all from his thick Cockney accent. he's just wearing these fancy clothes, and he might be getting married. And like I said before, I think that is my favourite song in the whole movie because it's the most fun, I feel, because it's one of those drinking songs.
Both of his songs are very much like fun, energetic drinking songs, because there's that one and A Little Bit of Luck. And A Little Bit of Luck is one that I always remember as well.
That is a good one as well.
Yeah.
But that Get Him to the Church on Time reminded me a lot of some of the songs in Oliver, which of course I've mentioned before, because there's a couple of really good catchy drinking songs in that movie. So I really liked that. But yeah, I really like Alfred Doolittle in a weird way, because even though he sells his daughter for a £5 note,
and is offered 10. He was offered 10.
He is offered 10. He denies no more, no less. I will take £5, and the recommendation of some sort of lecturer, to which I now become a fairly wealthy human being.
Yeah.
But I just like the fact that he gives up absolutely none of his previous life and continues to be a little bit of a scoundrel.
Which is really funny too, because the whole premise of the movie going into it is Eliza doesn't have opportunities because of her linguistic capability, her inability to present herself in a way that other chunks of society would accept her. But then you have her father, that all it took is someone saying, like, give this guy a chance, and they gave him a chance, and now he's making bank for being a lecturer or something. So it's a weird, funny, and that's what I was getting back to. Like, at the end of the day, Eliza got what she wanted, and then when she was offered the opportunity to be independent with it, she didn't take it, because with her skills and knowledge and her new linguistic capability, she probably could have been like working in an actual flower shop as opposed to being a street flower seller. And I don't know. I think there's, of course, more there, but I think it has more to do with the complicated relationship between the sexes that existed in the time periods that this movie and the original play was written in.
Yeah, quite possibly. It is where, like I said before, where my where I wished that ending was a little bit different. I wish she went off and became very much her own person, like her father does.
Yeah.
But yeah, I completely understand why it ends as it does. Absolutely.
Yeah. Though it also kind of gives you this impression that even though it ends with her going back to him, that there's some sort of begrudging level of respect that he has for her now too, that he's finally realized that, like, maybe he can have a woman in his life, so to speak, and care about someone other than himself, because he finally admits that he misses her.
He does, and we get that sort of ending song from him, which is something like, "I've grown accustomed to your face."
Yep.
Or something like that is its name. And
which I guess
it's about
the most we can get from
redemption.
him. Yeah.
Exactly. It's the little bit of redemption that the movie tries to put Professor Higgins through. I don't buy it, but I can see why it's thrown in there.
I don't know if this is actually a thing, but I will say that I would love to see like a modern adaptation of this. I'm not one normally to be like, yes, remake all the movies, because I hate that idea. Some things are just absolutely timeless and don't need to be remade. But I do love when, I'll use Romeo and Juliet as an example, or anything Shakespearean. The modernizations that some of these stories go through work really well. The Baz Luhrmann, was it Baz Luhrmann? The one with Leonardo DiCaprio is one of my favorite modern adaptations of that story. And then, of course, 10 Things I Hate About You is classic as well. So I think there is, especially in the kind of like culture and climate that we're in right now, almost globally, I think there is a place for an adaptation of this story. And I think it would be kind of interesting to see what someone would do with it.
Yeah, like really, really focus hard on the class aspect of it.
Yeah. the relation between the sexes and things like that. You don't have to, and you can make it not a musical if you really wanted to. The story is there that doesn't need the music.
Absolutely, you could.
I don't need another La La Land.
Look, sure, the music's great for entertainment purposes, for respect in terms of production value. The music and the choreography and the set design and the production design and everything like that is excellent.
Yeah.
But like you said, the story doesn't need it.
Nope.
The story could be you could turn it into a fairly, really hard-hitting drama if you wanted to.
You could even go lightly comedy with it.
Exactly. You could also make it a fairly silly comedy.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of things that you could do. I would be admittedly interested in seeing a kind of dramatic, maybe with a bit of a lightness to it, but a kind of dramatic, class-focused, gender-focused adaptation. Modern, like you said, modern adaptation of this, because it is fascinating when you think about it. Yeah. And even though there's some parts that give me, and this might be a little too harsh, but I don't think it is. It gives me second half of Vertigo vibes.
Okay.
In the sense that we have the man trying to drastically change the woman to serve his own purpose and to serve his own desire. There's for me there is that in My Fair Lady. However, it's way less sinister.
Very much so.
Also, obviously not forgivable in any way, because like we've kept saying, Henry Higgins is not a pleasant person.
No. It may not be sinister, but it's definitely callous and unfeeling.
Yeah. But we still can't help being very entertained by this movie.
We love a good villain, and even when he's not actually villainous, he's still kind of a dick, and we can still appreciate that as long as he's charming.
As long as he's charming. Charmingly misogynistic. What a complicated phrase.
Yeah, right?
Not something we should probably get into. That would take way too long.
And fully, this is a movie that, like, I acknowledge that I kind of viewed through nostalgia goggles, because, I was like 6 when I watched this movie almost daily.
Yeah.
And I didn't really understand what was really going on. I'm just like, haha, funny man's yelling, and the music's good, and the costumes are awesome. Oh, and I absolutely love the "Just You Wait, Henry Higgins, Just You Wait" line or scene. That whole musical number where she's imagining him getting shot by the firing squad for being a dick. Because who hasn't felt that way when you're like a really young kid with a teacher you hated?
I mean, I'm glad you bring that up, because that was great. That was one of my favourite songs as well. There's a lot of good songs in this movie. There really, really is. There is also, like we've said, this sort of very uncomfortable misogyny throughout the movie. But it's still a very entertaining movie. And there is a lot to enjoy about this movie. And Audrey Hepburn, of course, crushes it. As she always does. There is also plenty of silliness, and if you can watch this movie with silliness eyes on, rather than oh god, Rex Harrison's the worst, even though it's not Rex Harrison, Professor Higgins is the worst. If you can watch it with silliness eyes and not those horrible other ones, then it's going to be one that is going to entertain you for nearly 3 hours, and it doesn't feel like that. It's a very smoothly made movie.
It kind of runs pretty well. Like, yeah, it's as smooth as a nice glass of port.
Even though we don't know what port tastes like,
But
as we have
apparently it's
found
nice.
out today. But apparently, yes, it is delightful. Joe, is there anything you want to finish up on? Is there any final little things you want to say about My Fair Lady? Any more nice little stories?
Well, now that, well, first off, it was difficult to find a place to rewatch it. I don't own it on DVD, and it's not streaming anywhere over here. So I had to find it on some, like, I found it on some website that was basically for movies in the public domain, which apparently this movie's in the public domain now.
That's interesting.
But the video, or the online video of this movie in the public domain, still also had the intermission and the little intermission scene and things like that. But in general, I loved this movie as a kid, and it's one of those ones that I don't know if I would love it as much if I approached it now, because there's a lot of movies I grew up watching that are very much like, my grandmother loved this movie, and she's obviously from a very different time than I am, and like this, and like a lot of Bing Crosby films, and like Holiday Inn was another one I grew up with, and White Christmas. Holiday Inn and White Christmas were two of my favorites, and seeing them now, I'm kind of like, wow, this was very problematic.
I remember watching White Christmas for the first time, of course, at Christmas a couple of years ago. I didn't like White Christmas.
I like Holiday Inn much better than White Christmas, but yes, I also agree.
Which was weird, because you know me, I often love movies from the certain era, even despite, what some people may call old views on certain things, old morality. I can very often look past that.
It's not like they can go back and change the base plots of what went into making these movies. So if you can appreciate a piece of art for what it was and still separate it from the problems that it had, as long as it's not like, I'm not going back and watching a movie made by Nazis or something.
No, that's impossibly too far.
Yeah. There are levels.
I'm talking about something like this movie we've been talking about right here.
Yeah.
Which, like you said, the ending has its sort of almost gaslighting type of situation about it. Almost kind of like, I can't leave this man.
Yeah.
Even though he's kind of mean type of thing about it.
Very.
But there's... very. But yeah, there's enough there for me that I can look past that and enjoy what I enjoy about this and want to go and rewatch this.
Yep.
And that's good enough for me.
I think if you can absorb these films with the same level that some people absorb, like the Fast and Furious films, like where they're just, this movie's dumb fun at the end of the day. It's a dumb fun movie about people talking.
Kind of is. Kind of really is.
So,
and if you like musicals, then essentially you have to watch My Fair Lady.
Yeah, it is one of the best.
There's too many iconic musical things in this movie for you not to watch. Joe, it has been a great pleasure having you on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me. I've really appreciated it. I've wanted to talk about this movie somewhere for a long time because it's a part of my life growing up.
Well, I'm very glad that you came on this show, came on It's a Wonderful Podcast, to do that. Tell everyone what you've got going on, where everybody can find you, what's happening with Joe Davis.
Not a lot at the moment, just getting ready to go back to school for the semester, but you can find me at Twitter, where I'm at the Spice Must Joe. You can also find me on YouTube with my wife Ashley, who was on this podcast previously, where we're at youtube.com/geek2mynerd. And we have a communal Twitter account with Geek to My Nerd with underscores between each one. Currently, if I'm working on anything, I'm working on a local gaming convention in my area. I'm doing some social stuff for it and photography and that kind of stuff. So that's happening in early September. So if you have any other listeners in Southeast Texas, they can check out Game Theory Events. And that
Very
is,
cool.
it's a tabletop gaming convention. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Tabletop gaming that does not involve My Fair Lady.
It wouldn't surprise me if there's like a My Fair Lady board game somewhere.
That would be so interesting. How would that even work?
I have no idea.
Do you get the costumes yourself? Do you have to
You
have to go out into the public, find someone who speaks in a distinct accent and change them within an hour and teach them a thing to say in received pronunciation English, and then you win. I've come up with a game. Yay. Can that come to your tabletop convention? I think it should.
Oh, you should
I think I'm
Kickstarter
good.
it. You Kickstarter it
I'm
first.
going.
You get a prototype design done, and then you run the. Honestly, you're closer to Germany than I am. Germany has a massive board game and tabletop game convention every year. Like, people from here travel to Germany to go to this convention.
I will go to Germany with My Fair Lady the board game, or My Fair Lady the social experiment game created by It's a Wonderful Podcast. Yay. Joe,
All right.
Thank you again for coming on the show. You can find this show on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, Castbox, and various other places you find your audio podcast. Leave those 5-star rating reviews on Apple Podcasts, because it really helps the show out and boosts us up there, so more people listen to the nonsense old movies that I like to talk about with various people, including the lovely Joe Davis, who has been on today to talk about My Fair Lady. But you can also find the show on Twitter at It's a Wonderful One. You can find me on Twitter at the Purple Don with a 3 instead of the E in the, because 3 is the magic number, or on Instagram at just the Purple Don. That is going to do it for episode 68 of It's a Wonderful Podcast. For Joe Davis, I am Morgan Robinson. And until next time, oh God, it's episode 69 next time. Oh no. Oh no, we should have done something special and I don't know what to do. Damn it. Oh well, I guess you'll all see what the hell's gonna happen next week on the unfortunately titled episode 69. Until then, guys, bye.